she was selling her pink bicycle for a reason that would break your heart. He was a man who had lost faith in the world. On a quiet suburban street, these two opposites collided. But this isn't a story about a transaction. It's a story about revenge. Why did a gang of bikers march into a high-rise office building to confront a millionaire CEO? And why did it all start with a little girl's empty stomach? Watch until the end, because the justice served in this video is something you need to see to believe. It all began with a sound that felt entirely out of place on such a quiet, suburban street. It was the deep, guttural rumble of Harley-Davidson engines slicing through the afternoon air, sounding like thunder rolling across a previously calm sky. Four bikers rode into view, their black leather vests bearing the fiery insignia of the Hells Angels, casting long, stretching shadows across the sun-warmed pavement. Neighbors peered out nervously from behind drawn curtains. Anxious mothers ushered their children indoors, and even the wind seemed to hesitate in anticipation. But amidst that mechanical rumble and heavy steel, a smaller, softer voice emerged, trembling, innocent, and heartbreakingly desperate. "Sir, will you buy my bike?" The men eased off their throttles, letting the engines idle low. Standing at the very edge of the sidewalk was a little girl, surely no more than 6 years old. Her hair was light and messy, and her dress appeared far too neat in contrast to how scuffed and worn her shoes looked. Beside her stood a pink bicycle equipped with a white basket, and in her small hands, she clutched a piece of cardboard with the handwritten words, "For sale." The smallest biker, or perhaps simply the kindest one, killed his engine and climbed off. The others followed suit, their heavy boots thudding rhythmically against the pavement. He knelt before the child, a chrome of his bike gleaming behind her, reflecting a distorted image of a cruel world. Her name was Meera, and her eyes held an emotion that should never exist in a child's face: sheer exhaustion. Behind her, resting under a tree in the distance, an older woman sat slumped against the trunk, wrapped tightly in a blanket, looking pale and dangerously thin. The biker's throat tightened as Meera spoke again, squeezing her sign just a little tighter. "Please, sir, Mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days." The biker's name was Ryder. His brothers in the club called him Wolf, but the nickname had never really fit him. Beneath the layers of tattoos and leather lived a man who had lost more than most people could ever imagine. He was a father who had walked away, a son who'd never returned home, and a man whose faith in the world had, he thought, vanished long ago. But on that day, kneeling on the hot pavement, he felt something stir within him again. He asked her softly what she meant. In between halting breaths and tiny tears, Meera told him everything. Her mother, Clara, had worked at a local catering compa owned by a man named Mr. Hensley. He was a CEO who smiled from magazine covers and made public donations to charities whenever the cameras were rolling. However, when the company downsized, Clara was among those fired. She had pleaded with him, begging to keep her job for just a few weeks longer so she could afford to feed her daughter. But Hensley didn't care. He simply told her she was replaceable. Since then, Clara had been too weak to find new work. The bills had piled up, the fridge was empty, and pride kept her from asking for help. Consequently, Meera had taken her only toy, her pink bicycle, and decided to sell it for food. Ryder felt something inside him snap, like the last thread holding back years of buried anger. His brother Stank Viper and Mason had seen that look before. Without a single word, they nodded. It wasn't pity they felt. It was rage, the kind born from seeing innocence crushed by greed. Ryder reached into his vest, pulled out his wallet, and placed a thick wad of bills into the little girl's trembling hand. "Keep the bike, kiddo," he murmured, his voice low and rough with emotion. But this wasn't the end of the encounter. Not for him. He realized he couldn't just ride away knowing that powerful men had stripped everything from a woman and her child. He told Meera to stay with her mother and promised he would come back soon. Then, the engines roared to life again. The Hells Angels weren't saints, but they operated on their own kind of justice. They didn't use guns or violence that day. What they used was the truth. They tracked down Hensley's office, a tall glass building that gleamed in the sunlight, standing as a monument to arrogance. The four men walked in like thunder following lightning, their boots echoing loudly against the marble floors. The receptionists froze in fear. Ryder's eyes locked onto Hensley through the glass wall of his office. He saw the kind of man who wore a gold watch, flashed a fake smile, and had hands that hadn't worked an honest day in years. "What is this?" Hensley scoffed as they entered. But Ryder didn't shout. He simply placed the "for sale" sign on the CEO's pristine desk, the same cardboard Meera had held. "That," he said quietly, "is what your greed cost." For the first time, the polished businessman looked genuinely shaken. Ryder told him about the little girl, the mother starving under a tree, and the bicycle that was worth more in love than all of his cars combined. Hensley tried to defend himself, mumbling about business necessities and layoffs, but his excuses died when he saw the fury in those men's eyes. It wasn't criminal rage, but a moral fire. They didn't hurt him. They didn't have to. Instead, Ryder leaned in close and said, You don't get to buy forgiveness, but you do get a chance to do what's right. By sunset, the news had spread across the town that the CEO who once fired a struggling mother had anonymously donated a year's worth of groceries to families in need, paid off hospital bills for single parents, and rehired those he'd wronged. No one knew exactly what had changed his heart. Only a few rough men and a little girl with a pink bike knew the truth. When Ryder and his brothers returned to that tree later that evening, Meera ran to them, her eyes wide with joy. Her mother, Clara, stood now. She was still weak, but she was smiling for the first time in weeks. The fading light caught her face, and Ryder noticed the way her hand trembled when she tried to thank him. He simply nodded, tipping his head as the engines cooled beside them. "You don't owe us anything," he said. "Just promise you'll never give up." They shared bread that night. The bikers, the woman, and the little girl who had sold her bike not for toys, but for love. The sunset painted gold across the chrome, the grass, and the cardboard sign that now lay folded in Meera's lap. For a moment, the world didn't seem so broken anymore. Asterisk, asterisk.